welcome to you, Archana, and thank you for accepting our request.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah. I'd like to invite all of you all to participate in our lecture series. This happens once a month. Please spread the word. Last month we had another very close friend of mine who talked about uh, Antarctica, and Archana must be obviously knowing him. So we are trying to take you to different geographies, while once we take you to the Himalaya and show you the rivers and the systems over there. We take you to mythological stories. We talk about coins, and this time we're going to be talking about forests being the solution for solving global problems like food crisis or employability or environmental and climate problems are there. Today, a very new thing that has happened is that we have uh, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung FES, which is a German organization, hosting us on this platform today for this lecture series. And here onwards, they will be a partner. So I would like to place my gratitude towards FES for providing us this platform. So Rahul, please, can you introduce the lecture series, FES, as well as Dr. Archana Godbole. And my dad has joined in from Devruk, Archana, so he's also
Hi.
listening to your.
नमस्कार. यांना नमस्कार सांग.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. So the Sprouts lecture series is a forum to forum for discourse on environment and environmental issues. It is a free lecture series, and we are currently in the 10th year. It started originally in Mahim Nature Park, and it used to be a physical event. But now, with the onset of the pandemic, we have decided to go online, and we have been able to bring in speakers from all over the world, as well as gain a global participation and global viewership. And would like to take it forward. Every month, there is a lecture by an eminent expert in a field, and the current topics and research is discussed, and public are free to participate and ask questions. Now, I would like to introduce FES. FES is one of the oldest foundations in Germany, kind of a think and do tank, which remains loyal to the legacy of its founder, Friedrich Ebert, who was the first democratically elected president of Germany. FES works on the core ideas and values of social democracy, freedom, justice, and solidarity. Its international cooperation work is spread in more than 100 countries around the world. It has been active in India since 1980s, and it has built platforms for exchange of progressive discourses and fostered debates on national, regional, and global level. The webinar is part of FES's work on socio-ecological transformation, which aims to understand and create transformative discourses dealing with three mega trends in India, that is energy transformation, urbanization, and digitalization. And all these primarily from climate change as well as future of work perspective. The other two cross-cutting works or units at FES India are labor and industrial relations and gender and social justice. I would like to formally introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Archana Godbole. Dr. Archana Godbole is the founder director of the Pune-based NGO Applied Environmental Research Foundation (AERF), a plant taxonomist and ethnobiologist by training. She is a fellow of Leadership for Environment and Development since 2000 and Whitley Associate Award winner of 2007. Dr. Godbole represented CSOs from Asia and the Pacific region on the World Bank's decision-making process for the Forest Investment Program for 9 years. Clinton's global initiative felicitated her for her work to safeguard the biodiversity of Western Ghats. AERF under Archana's leadership has successfully linked conservation with businesses. AERF specialized in conservation on the ground and is now promoting and scaling up nature based solutions for the last 7 years. So, with this, I would like to formally invite Dr. Archana Godbole to begin the talk.
So I'd like to add one small thing before we start. Is that I had the good fortune of spending quite a lot of time with Dr. Archana Gudbole in field. We worked on a EIA project together of the Upper Tapi Pump Storage project in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, and it was quite a fun time. So although people do serious work, but there is a lot of fun also that one can have in field, and if you ever work with Archana, you'll know that there is absolutely, conservation is a very serious business and is a lot of serious hard work, but that doesn't mean you cannot have fun. So yeah, over to you, Archana.
Hi, Anand and Rahul. Thank you very much for that, quick introduction. First of all, I would like to thank Sprout and FES for providing this opportunity, to talk to you all on a very, very important international day, that is World International Biodiversity Day. I think the time has come that we all, the urban nature lovers and whoever likes to, see nature, enjoy nature, and get peace from nature should look at how we are going to actually contribute to that rather than just celebrating the days and sending, some messages on WhatsApp, with nice pictures and cartoons or, whatever we do. And we all are sincere and we love, to figure out what we can do and how it could be done. But unfortunately, because we have been doing many other things for our life, for our livelihoods, and these things, they remain in one warm corner of our hearts, but there are some people like me who never allowed those things to sit in the corner of the heart. And I have decided long time ago, immediately after completing my PhD, that I will do something on the ground and I'll see to it that how I'm going to really protect the biodiversity. It could be in one little corner on the globe or some bigger landscape, but I will definitely do that. And my training as a botanist, plant taxonomist, as well as ethnobotany later on, to learn from indigenous communities how they are linked and connected to nature, gave me ample understanding that I could use seriously in working for conservation of biodiversity. We all know that India is a mega diversity country, and at the same time, we also have a lot of issues, and it is extremely difficult for us to, maintain and protect the biodiversity against the need of our huge population for development and becoming, the globalized nation. But still, there are many people like me who have been trying to do the work, and it is my pleasure to tell you quickly about what we are doing. I always love to talk about my work. Anand knows that, and but still, I'll try to be rapid, and I'll summarize what we have been doing for last, say, 26 years. But then I think I'll be very happy to figure out that some of you definitely get inspiration and join hands with us or many other organizations who are doing similar kind of work. So thank you very much once again to FES and Sprout. I will quickly take you through my presentation. I generally would love to talk about my work, and as Anand rightly said, I feel that we have not lost the battle of conservation. I'm very, very optimistic, and I feel that unless we enjoy the work, it is a hard work, and many a times you do things and you're not all that successful, but still you need to be cheer up, and for that cheering up, you need to be very, very happy, and you need to find fun in your work, and that we have been doing. And once I'm in the forest, I'm totally different person than what you're probably looking at me right now. But therefore, I think we all need to be very, very optimistic. We need to learn the lessons through the situations which we are facing right now, that is pandemic. So I think it is a great idea to have such talks and keep people's enthusiasm about biodiversity, about environment, and about forests on, and take them to different areas. Like Ganesh has taken you to Antarctica, and Ganesh is another fun friend.
Phenomenal speaker, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Ganesh is also a fellow of Leeds, so we were together in the same batch, and I think so. It's. I'm already feeling that I'm really connected to so many people who think positively about the biodiversity. So let's have a look at what we have been doing. Okay, so I will be talking about how over the period of time AERF learned how to do conservation on the ground, because it is easier said than done. Most of us are engaged into kind of tree plantations or environmental education programs. I'm sure they're extremely important things, but that not necessarily contribute in a measurable manner to the conservation process. So it's absolutely difficult, and we have been working in the field for last say 26 plus years, and how we have started and how we have reached where we are today, and linking business and biodiversity in a successful manner, and how we scale that up. And so let's quickly go through that. We are working in Western Ghats. We all know Western Ghats is a global biodiversity hotspot. Global biodiversity hotspot is not just a great biodiverse area, but at the same time, it is facing enormous pressure of human needs, human populations, and the destruction of forests and biodiversity is rampant. The organization, International Conservation Organization, called Conservation International, they have studied for more than 10 years, and in 2002 they came up with the idea to designate the global biodiversity hotspot. And why they designated that? It was not an academic exercise, but they wanted to see that where the conservation investments and efforts should be concentrated on. So they have designated, they have researched and found out that there are 34 global biodiversity hotspot where the investment and efforts and people's work and research and everything has to be done quickly. Otherwise, we'll lose huge amount of biodiversity, which is unique to these areas. And Western Ghats mountain range, which is running parallel to India's west coast, is one such global biodiversity hotspot. We have another biodiversity hotspot in India, that is Eastern Himalayan region, Sikkim and Arunachal and all, which is also very unique as far as biodiversity is concerned, and that also is facing lots and lots of pressure from the human beings. Then we all know that Western Ghats are also designated as UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is not the complete Western Ghat which is a heritage site, but there are 39 smaller sites which are UNESCO World Heritage Site, and many national parks and tiger projects are included in that. In Maharashtra, we have Khas Plateau, which is a part of UNESCO World Heritage Site. Then we have Chandoli and Koyna wildlife sanctuaries, which are now also part of Tiger Project, Sahyadri Tiger Reserve. So therefore, this landscape is very unique, and you can see some very interesting photographs, and I'm sure many of you would like to visit, and many of you must have visited various places from the Sahyadris or northern Western Ghats, and this is our Karma Bhumi where we work for last 26 years. Western Ghats supports 5,000 species of flowering plants, 135 species of mammals, 600 birds, 157, and these numbers are required at times, because if I go and ask somebody to put some money in conservation efforts, then they would like to know what is there, why you want to maintain that and protect that, number one, and how you are going to do that. So initially, the kind of research that has been done in this area for last so many years comes very handy. And even today, many youngsters, they are finding new species of amphibians and lizards and grasses and smaller fauna like spiders, and all that is extremely important to build the case of this region and to attract the investment. Because we initially, Anand, talked about the hard work of conservation, but the most important thing is when you run a conservation organization with only focus on conservation on the ground, it is extremely difficult for you to get support and funding. It's easy to get money for philanthropy, and that is important. I'm not saying human beings are not important, but to get money for other species than human beings, or to get money to strengthen the ancient link of human beings and all the other living beings is difficult. And for that, you need to produce numbers and graphs and infographics all the time. And these are some of the photographs you can see here. As far as AERF is concerned, we work in the northern part of Western Ghats, that is Maharashtra and Goa's Western Ghat. It is called as Northern Western Ghat. Don't look into that map because they have put Goa into Central Western Ghats, but we consider that as Northern Western Ghats. I would like to tell you a little story about that. When it comes to global biodiversity hotspot, which is Western Ghats, most of the people internationally before, say, a decade or so, they used to think about Southern Western Ghats because Southern Western Ghats has got different kinds of forests. The amount of protected areas, that is national parks and sanctuaries and biosphere reserves, are far more than in the northern parts of Western Ghats. So most of the research, many good research institutions were in the Southern Western Ghats, and everybody was concentrating only on South. But since we have been working in northern parts of Western Ghats for so many years, we realized that this part is equally important. It has got its own different biodiversity. We may not have the species of South, say we may not have Vateria indica grows, but we have Canarium strictum, up to Alibag. Many people will not believe because we never write papers about that. Or we find the Wayanad bush frog, which is considered endemic in Wayanad. It is available in Ratnagiri at many, many places. Also in parts of, some pockets in Alibag. So, it was just that people were not promoting this area as equally biodiverse area. And I mean, that's fine. There's no problem. But the problem is at the policy level, If the policymakers feel that all the good biodiversity and important biodiversity, which has to be protected, is in the southern parts, that is in the states of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala, then there is no problem doing all the projects at the cost of forest and biodiversity in northern parts of Western Ghats. And when we realized that, we thought that it is not a good idea. Fortunately, again, Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, which is the another small section of Conservation International, they have also created ecological profile of Western Ghats, and in that they have designated certain corridors. And in that, fortunately, with our little contribution and whatever research has been done earlier, they have found out and designated Sahyadri Konkan corridor, which is linking the Sahyadri mountain ranges to the Konkan area. And that whole area is absolutely biodiverse. And fortunately, we are working in that area in Ratnagiri, Sindhudurg, and Raigad district, and parts of Satara, Kolhapur, and Sangli districts. So, excuse me, when these things happen or taking shape at national and international level, there are quite a lot of facets to that, and we as nature lover, we never, look at that or generally understand that. But when we started working in this area a long time ago, we realized that we need to promote and focus on this area. And I'm absolutely happy to tell you that because we have been pushing the case of Northwestern Ghats, now many researchers, they have started putting Northwestern Ghats in the title of their research papers, number one. Secondly, from 2009, we have started attracting, large grants to biodiversity related research and conservation work in the Northwestern Ghats. Till such time, nobody was giving large grants and people were just giving some small grants, do some small research, publish a paper and be done with that. But then this is what a difference we have made. We are working through two major programs. We are working on many small projects, but I'll be talking only about two projects. One is conservation of sacred forest. I'm sure everybody in Maharashtra and those who like to go to forest or have little knowledge of traditions of forest conservation in India, they all must have heard about sacred groves or Devrai. Ratnagiri district, Sindhudurg, as well as Raigad, they are full of sacred groves, especially Ratnagiri district. And when we started working in that area, we realized that the picture is not very rosy as it is, created through a lot of popular articles and all. Sacred groves are also facing a lot of issues. People are cutting them. Sometimes government is using them for schools and roads and dams and whatnot. And rampant felling of trees happens for renovation of temples. So all that we realized, and we thought it's a great idea, and let's start working based on that. So this is a one program which we started long time ago in 1995, and it is still running. And now we have taken it to a completely different level, which I'll be talking about it a little later. Our another program is conservation of privately owned forests. When we started working, there was a notion that all the conservation work is done only around the protected areas, maybe sanctuary or protected or national park or tiger project, and communities are facing issues, and you can work with the communities and you can contribute to the process of government-led legal conservation. But we have been working in the niche area where there is no protected area, and we are working in open access area, especially in Ratnagiri and Sindhudurg district, where most of the land and greenery, what we see, is owned by people. The land is by people and families. The whole process and the whole nature of that ownership is complicated, but it's not government's land. So it is a blessing in disguise in a one way, because you can just go and start working with communities and protect that. But the other danger is, it's my land, I can go and cut the forest any day, without any permission or anything from the forest department or government. So we thought that this is very important, and let's see if we can really contribute to conservation of these private forests. And I'm very happy to tell you that over the period of last, say, about 12-13 years since we started this program called Conservation Agreements, we could ensure the protection of 8,500 acres in more than 20 villages from Ratnagiri, Sindhudurg districts, as well as in and around Bhimashankar and other parts of Pune district, especially looking at private forests. I'll come to rest of the numbers little later. So as I said that we face a lot of challenges. One is rampant deforestation, because one can take the decision any day. Then development project, and the biggest issue of land conversion and loss of biodiversity in Konkan region is mainly the plantations of cashew and mango by cutting the valuable diverse forests. And government has been providing subsidy, and we all know there are huge problems. Government departments, they never talk to each other. So agriculture department is pushing for more and more plantations of cashew and mango, and more forests are being cut. And since these are privately owned lands, forest department is not interested in taking any action on that. And unfortunately, basically these cashew plantations came up long time ago as a part of making Konkan sa California. It never happened California, because just planting is not enough. You need to literally link every farmer with the market. He should get good money out of that. And please, we all must understand that just planting will not get you money. You need to work on that, and you need to have a manpower, which is unfortunately lacking in Konkan. Most of the people, even today, they are migrating from Konkan region to Mumbai or any other urban areas for better livelihood. So, this is a vicious circle. One department is promoting the deforestation for some good development, because of due to cashew and mango plantations, but there is no other support to making really those plantations beneficial, directly beneficial, getting more money to people. And therefore, what people do is, if I plant on 5 acres and it is not providing me good money, or I'm not getting good harvest, I go for another subsidy and cut 5 more acres of forest. So this whole vicious circle was affecting the whole biodiversity. At the same time, we were looking at, this is the grim side of the whole picture. But at the same time, when we were going into the interior forests and enjoying our great, long 7-8 kilometers forest walks up to the crestline area, we could see a lot of pockets, a lot of biodiversity in that. We could see some nicely maintained sacred forest and great giant trees in that. So we started, working on that. And finally, we realized that we need to figure out something which will bring some sustainable income to local people if we want to achieve conservation in the long term, because nobody is going to give us money and funding to do our conservation innocently, without engaging with people meaningfully for a long time, and now since corporates are engaged and they want results and they want to see the numbers, so we started thinking on those lines, some 10-15 years ago. I'll come back to sacred groves again. You all know that Devrais are the last remaining relic forest patches, or the region's ecological history. There is a huge amount of kind of deities, and how these deities were important in linking local people to the resources, to the nature around that, how that was also part of the socio and cultural happenings in the village, and how that whole institution of sacred grove was managed by local mandals or mankaris in some villages. But again, that also is being destroyed, in a sense that there is a lot of acculturation is happening. The people, youngsters from the villages, they are not interested in such kind of institutions. They want mobile phones. They do have, but they have all the great films of some butterflies or some lizard, but they are not bothered about maintaining that forest for butterflies or lizards. And how their ancestors, their generations in the village were linked to these institutions, and how that institution kept on providing information and generating awareness about the value of biodiversity in their minds. That all is going, and that is the worst impact of globalization. And we are getting disconnected by nature because of all this social media and WhatsApp, and we all know how difficult it is, but still, and we know how frustrating it is. Many a times wrong information is spread, but still all of us keep looking at our WhatsApp messages at least once in an hour, and youngsters, they keep doing it all the time. So that is also hampering the conservation in rural areas where little biodiversity is fortunately left. So I now come back to our work of conservation agreements. When we realize that all these privately owned lands, people just go for clear felling, because the logging contractor in the village, he will come and say, hey, you have 5 acres and I want to give you some 5,000 rupees, and I'll bring my truck, I'll bring my laborers, and I'll just give you money. That was a good proposition, because as I said, this land ownership is complicated. I am staying in the village, but 4 of my brothers, they are in Mumbai, and they are also claimants on the land. So the one who's remaining in the village is already very unhappy, because he couldn't get the opportunity to go to the city. And on top of it, he cannot do anything with the land, because he has to take permission, he has to take their consent to do anything, any development. Then he doesn't have enough investment to work on that land. And whatever, if even if he does, he has to share the benefits with all his claimants sitting in Mumbai or any other urban area. So, this is the bigger problem and picture. But if he gives that land for clear felling of forest to a logging contractor, he need not even tell the people from Mumbai, because you don't have to give the 7-bara extract or consent to a logging contractor. So you just sell the trees on that land. No land is sold, and whatever money is received, that is received only to one person. And he needs the money because he's not getting like monthly salary or something. And therefore, this whole idea of cutting forest spread across Ratnagiri district. Another important thing that contributed to this rampant deforestation was there was a huge demand for lesser timber, or firewood, which is required for many factories in Ichalkaranji and other factories from Kolhapur and Sangli district. And this was very cheap available firewood. Another thing is, people used to say that, hey, in Sangameshwar it rains huge, in Ratnagiri rainfall is very high, so even if we cut the forest, in 5 to 6 years the forest regenerates. I know very few people here might be knowing that Sangameshwar many a times in rainy season is the second highest rainfall station in India. So you can imagine. And people say, hey, don't worry, don't talk about forest destruction because it comes back. But when we have been studying this, we realize that once you cut the forest with good species and big trees, after 5-6 years, the quality of forest deteriorates. Then these guys again give it to a logging contractor. Then again it deteriorates. And after 3 cycles of cutting, it becomes just the thorny bushy land with some karavanda and other kind of stuff, which is useless to wildlife, to any ecosystem services and things like that. So we started our first program of incentive-based mechanism. We started talking to owners of forests and who were discussing with wood logging contractors that they wanted to cut their forest. So we started talking to them, and we made an offer that if the logging contractor is giving you 5,000 rupees, we'll give you 5,500 or 6,000 rupees. But only condition is you will have to enter into a legal agreement with us that you will not cut this forest for 5 years. And people say, well, okay, our idea is to get money, we don't want to cut forest. And then many of them, they started feeling that, hey, they are asking something to write on the paper, so they might, steal our land. But then we said, no, the land will remain your own land. So we started working on this, and this conservation agreement strategy has been developed and worked successfully by Conservation International. But they have worked it in South American countries and in African countries, and they worked with huge indigenous people's concessions, provided by the governments, and indigenous people were supposed to give those lands to either logging or for mining or stuff. And there they used this strategy and postponed, those huge logging and mining operations in the area. But here the situation was different. We were initially working with the local individuals, and many of them, they liked the idea. And we started this program in 2007 and 8. We have done a small pilot in 2007 with my colleagues for Grant. And when we went to people and talked about this idea, they say, okay, you are saying something, we'll do it, because they knew us by then for almost 12-13 years. And they say, okay, these guys are not running away. They are not coming here just for one day's plantation or some programs here and there and leave. They have not left us for so many years. So let's do it. And some people, they have done that. And then the word has been spread by people themselves, and many people, they started coming to us. However, it is very easy to say that, hey, don't cut your forest and I'll give you more money. But then you need to create that money. So that was another big program development as far as the ERF is concerned. And what we did was, we started talking to some of our corporate friends, and people like Praj Industries and Innoventive and smaller foundations in the beginning. They said, okay, this is a good idea, we will provide you some money. And they gave us some funding, And most importantly, our first large grant project in 2009, supported by Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund, has supported more than some 300 to 400 acres of forest conservation using conservation agreements as a strategy. So that we have done, and then we got a lot of confidence, and then we built our business and biodiversity program. But this getting money and raising funds for conservation agreement was just one part of our business and biodiversity program. Again, when this program started spreading, we realized that, hey, you cannot, keep asking money every 5 years or 10 years, and then from where you will get the money and why somebody will give you money. So we started also looking at other strategies. And the most important strategy we thought was, how do we really make these forests productive? And without cutting, how these forests will get money to the owners. And we started working on that. And therefore, over the period of last 12 years, we have developed a few green enterprises or nature-based solutions that are giving money and giving a lot of benefits to local people. We also looked at, strategies like developing some community reserves and engaging communities in that, and then building, sustainable and sensitive tourism around that. So that also we are doing. And continuously, we are doing our efforts to engage with corporate companies. Why corporate companies? Many of you might think that corporates have money. I think that is just one part, But the most important thing is, if you do something and if it is accepted by corporates, which are kind of big brothers or big players for our policymakers, and then there are chances that your program will be scaled up easily, and the policies also will be good enough to support your ideas in the long term. So these are some of our strategies. Okay, coming back to sacred groves, Anand knows, and many of you, if you have visited Ratnagiri and Sangameshwar block, some of the sacred groves are still very well preserved. And over the period of last 25 years, we have thoroughly studied 500 sacred groves. We have done various kinds of assessments based on that, what kind of ecosystem services they provide. And we have been working for conservation of 75 sacred groves. And this conservation includes restoration, it includes little plantations, it includes little fencing and actual protection, it includes the green enterprises based on resources within the sacred forest, because we all understand that these sacred groves are the key biodiversity areas, And when I say key biodiversity areas, because in this area of Konkan, most of the landscape is owned by local people, privately owned. So there is no protection, and rampant deforestation happens. But then you are not going to go for plantation on, say, 60,000 hectares available private land in Ratnagiri district. So, nature should have some, basis for that regeneration to happen. And these sacred forests, the trees within the sacred forest, the birds dispersing the seeds that are nesting in the sacred forest, these are the actual agents to actually to support the regeneration in this vast landscape. And therefore, these are the key biodiversity areas, and we have been putting a lot of efforts for conservation of sacred forests. I'm going to give you one story, little bit. There is a village called Nandras on Dhamapur Road, which is about, say, 10 kilometers from Devrup. And this village has had a very old style temple and a sacred grove with Terminalia bellerica trees, and there were about 40 huge Terminalia bellerica trees. You can see the picture on the left hand side. And AERF's major enterprise is based on Terminalia bellerica trees in Ratnagiri district. We all know that Terminalia bellerica fruits called behda or bheda, they are part of Triphala, which is very well-known Ayurvedic medicine. And earlier, some traders used to come in this area and buy the fruits for, say, 1 or 2 rupees a kg. However, nobody was interested in collecting the fruits. It is extremely difficult to actually climb on those, tall, huge trees of Terminalia bellerica. So slowly people have lost interest. And as I said, there is no manpower to do that. But mostly these trees now could be found only in the sacred forest. Outside sacred forest, these trees have been failed. Why they were failed? Because people in Konkan, they know another very important and remunerative use. I mean, not remunerative, one-time money there. Because the wood of Terminalia bellerica is used for making the truck cabins, And when we started a long time ago talking to people about uses of plants, they say, "Beda, yeah, truck chi cabin hote techi." So, this was the idea. They never thought that the trees can bring money without cutting them. So, from 2011, we started doing the resource assessments. How many sacred forests have these Terminalia bellerica trees? How much yield is there? Is it possible to build some enterprise around the fruits of Terminalia bellerica? Because in international market, the price of Terminalia bellerica fruits and powder was going high and high. So we thought, can we do that? Fortunately, we could meet the representatives of Pakka Herbs, a company from UK, which is in herbal teas in many way, and they were also into making Triphala tablets, and they were sourcing their material from companies from Bangalore, and they were very keen to do the sustainable harvesting. They wanted to know whether the protocols of sustainable collection are being followed or not. And then we thought that, this is a good idea, we can work together. And with the help of Pakka Hubs, we started looking at the possibilities of, getting certification for all these trees from various sacred groves from Ratnagiri district of Terminalia bellerica. And our interest was initially not the big business. Our interest was all these Terminalia bellerica trees should be saved. People should get money from the trees every year so that they will not go uncut. And another very important thing, and many of you might be knowing that, is the great hornbills and Malabar hornbills. They make their nests on ancient, old, huge Terminalia bellerica trees that are there in the sacred forest. And so, we had a great story here that Sacred Groves is a traditional conservation institute. These Terminalia bellerica trees are there. Hornbill, which is known as the forest farmer, because these hornbills, they eat the seeds of various trees, and they are dispersed through their excreta across the forest in northern western Ghats. And then we are trying to build some sustainable business, giving money to local people. So this was our story. And then from 2012 we did a lot of painstaking work, and from 2014 we started getting Fair Wild certification. This is the international certification, very stringent standard. It looks at sustainability in the wild. You're not cutting the trees, you're not cutting the branches. Then it is socially sustainable, that everyone in the village is getting benefits of that. And then it is economically sustainable. That means you're not getting money just one time, but it will keep getting. And there is a possibility to add some value so that without disturbing bigger resource, the value of the end product will be higher and people will be benefited. So we have been doing, and AERF is the first organization and only organization in India which is getting Fair Wild certification from Fair Wild Foundation from Switzerland for last 7 consecutive years. Why certification is so important for international buyers? Because people in the international market, the consumers, they're far more aware about the value of nature and biodiversity than us, unfortunately. And they are ready to pay more if somebody certifies that X product which they are buying has not adversely affected the nature or the local people, and the benefits are shared in a just manner. And they like this story of hornbills and Terminalia bellerica trees and sacred forests, and therefore they were ready to put more money to buy the Triphala tablets or powder, which is being sold by Pakka Herbs in UK and Europe market. So this is the whole story. And in this Nanded Sacred Grove, there were 37 big trees, and we were discussing with local people that we can include that village into our Fair Wild certification program. And we did little resource assessment, and we always used to see a lot of hornbills on the trees. And we were very happy that once we do that, we will save the Sacred Grove, we'll the old style, which is, eco-friendly and, not bringing, concrete structures and stuff. So we were talking to them and they were very happy, and they said, yeah, we are not going to do that, and let's get into that. Because we were also doing the Fairwide certification program in the Sacred Grove Ujgaon, which is very the nearby village of Nanglaj. So we started having some meetings and stuff, and to convince the local institution and Mankaris. So for 6 months we were discussing, and suddenly one of my colleague from the village, he told me that, look, they have decided to renovate the temple. So we said, oh, this is the bell ringing of danger, let's go. So we went and we again talked to them, and they said, look, we want to renovate the temple, and we'll not listen to you because our Mumbaikars will get money, and but we promise you that we'll not cut the trees. And we say, okay, because we have limited energy and resources, so you can't keep spending your resources and time. If you are assured for trees, then we say, okay, let them do it. And obviously, if people in the urban areas, they are impressed too much by urban structures and concrete, it is extremely difficult to convince them for not doing so. And we have many other stories, but we don't have enough time today. So we said, okay, please don't cut the trees. And slowly they started building the temple, and the temple was almost done. You can see in the picture on your right hand side, and still the trees were there. I have a picture in between, but I never put it here. And we used to look at that every now and then while traveling, and we were okay that the trees have not been cut. But one fine morning, shock for us, and in grief we went there and we started shouting and talking and fighting. And I said, look, we have built such a great temple, and there was little shortage of money, so there was no possibility to get money from Mumbaikar people. So we had to generate money, number one. And second thing, which was really, really bothering, and it was true, I'm not just telling you just to make the story interesting. Some people in the village said, hey, we have built such a great temple, and now we cannot even take the picture of that temple because of the trees. So we cut all the trees. And you just can't do anything. So these are some of the things, which give a lot of setback to you. But I think while doing conservation on the ground, these experiences are there and they're common, but you need to go ahead and see how you can deal with that. So now we are talking to people in that village and saying, let's at least plant certain trees of Terminalia bellerica, which will not destroy your view and all, and let's see if we can do that. This is our enterprise model, and from 2011 to 2014 we started building the Fairwild value chain. We did the feasibility, then we got the certification. We are also working on the value chain of Hirda, and these Hirda trees are available in Bhimashankar area, where tribals were getting meager money, and there was a monopoly of Tribal Development Corporation owned by government for tribals to sell the beda, but that ban was lifted, and it was possible to sell the Hirda fruits in open market. So we started our enterprise there. And these are Mahadev Koli tribal community there, and they are also part of the certification process. And over the period of last 7 years, now we pay 18 rupees a kg for dried fruits of Terminalia bellerica as well as Terminalia chebula on the spot. Then we have also provided training of the local collectors, and we provide them all the support and safety and insurances and all. And in Bhimashankar, more than 125 people have got, every year employment for at least 4 to 5 months on our processing center. In Devruk, we also have a processing center for beda fruits, because you have to dry this fruit, sun dry, and then you need to remove the stone, because stone is useless, and you need to dry the outer cover, and then that only is acceptable in the international and national market. So that also brings employment to many, many women. About 60 women, they get the employment. And we now process more than 12 tons of Terminalia bilerica fruits every year, and more than 600 to 700 trees of Terminalia chebula in Bhimashankar area. And more importantly, every time we are trying to bring in more value. So earlier we used to send the fruits. Now later we started removing the stone and drying them and sending the outer cover. Now we are selling the powder, and obviously powder gets more money. And therefore we have 2 centers in Sadavli MIDC where the powder making and packaging is done. Then simultaneously, we know because Terminalia bilerica trees, mostly they are restricted to sacred forests. But we have lots of other forests which we are protecting through conservation agreement program. And there we need to figure out, is there any possibility of any enterprise which will get money to the standing forest, and people will understand that standing forest gets more money than the clear field wood. So we are working on many other value chains. One of them is Pterocarpus marsupium tree. It has got a lot of anti-diabetic properties. Then we are also working on creating, organic medicinal plants and collection of guruvale and Sapindus laurifolia. And, in the international market, companies like L'Oreal, they are also interested in having better fruits of soap nut, where all the care has been taken while collecting the fruits. So we are working on a number of other value chains, and we are also working with farmers, who have abandoned their farming because again the farming is not bringing them money. So on a priority basis, those who are conserving forests with us, we are supporting them to go for organic cultivation of turmeric, organic cultivation of some kind of local varieties like ragi, and some kind of paddy varieties like khadkya and others. And there is a huge demand because all of us who are staying in urban areas, we are bothered about our food, as Anand rightly said in the beginning. That while doing conservation, you can't just say that we will work only for forest. You need to work on trees, you need to work on forest, you need to work on people, you need to work on the demands of people who are away from the forest, maybe development of ecotourism or developing local foods. So as a part of that, we are working on many different value chains. And I'm very happy to tell you that this year we could process more than 1.5 tons of organic turmeric, and all our products are available on Amazon under the brand called My Forest. So whenever you get time, and if you would like to have those products, you can visit My Forest and Amazon shop. I was talking about the importance of maintaining these private forests, and how that is also bringing immediate benefits to the local people. As I said, we have now ensured 8,500 acres of forest till 2028 and 2030, because we have more agreements after I made this slide last year. And why these forests are important? Because these forests, they could sequester, more than 5 lakh tons of carbon. It is maintained there. If it is cut, then this carbon will be released, and it will contribute to the process of climate change adversely. And we all know how climate change is bothering also the west coast of India, because we had last year Nisarga cyclone, this year we had that Tokte cyclone. So these trees and forests are extremely important for us. Then the rainfall is recycled through the forest. I need not get into those details. And, through our process, more than 4,000 plus socio-economic and ecological beneficiaries, because the forests are being protected, they are getting a lot of other services like water, soil, then these forests, because they are not opened up, they are also acting as a buffers, and the wild animals, they're not coming to the villages. So there are lots and lots of benefits. And as an organization, we are looking at 15,000 acres of the forest to be conserved till 2050. That is our target, and we are working towards that. And right now we have this program in 22 villages, and we have the program of green enterprise in more than 20 sacred forests. So, we are slowly and steadily scaling up our work. I'll just quickly tell you about sponsor a forest. You as an urban nature lover can also sponsor the forest. If we have to sponsor 1 acre of forest for 5 years, then you can just donate 10,000 rupees, and then you can come and see the forest. You can also see that on Google Map which forest is being conserved with your support. And so far, many people have supported us by contributing and asking us to maintain the forest in the name of their loved ones, for wedding anniversaries, for birthdays, or somebody has built a new house, and they wanted to save 1 acre of forest for that. And then there is also the option available of corporate sponsorship for 50 to 100 acres. You will have to support us, say 12 lakh or 25 lakhs for 5 to 10 years. Earlier we had our agreements for 5 years, but we realized that to make a forest productive in 5 years is a tall order, and therefore we requested and had negotiations with local people, and now we have a lot of agreements that are 10 years duration. And in some cases we had first agreements of 5 years, and later on people renewed those agreements for another 10 years. So the total period for which we stopped the land conversion from forest to anything else for 15 plus years. So that's how this unique and conservation, what we have been doing on the ground. Right now we have 3 campaigns live on Global Giving crowdfunding platform. One is for bees conservation. Second is about giant trees conservation. As I said in my talk, that it is very difficult to maintain the big giant trees, and people find them as hindrance, because in Konkan people feel that if this tree falls on my house, the house will be destroyed. So for last 6 years, AERF has initiated the program called Giant Tree Conservation Campaign, where we ensure the houses of people where they feel this danger, number one. Secondly, we felicitate people who are protecting the giant trees in their backyards or in their villages. Third is we also provide them some compensation every year for maintaining. And in all the cities, how the trees are being destroyed in cyclones, in monsoon. But the biggest cause of destruction of trees in the urban area is putting pavements on the around the trees, and slowly killing them, because no air goes into the roots, because everything is tightly concretized around the trees, and the trees, they fall easily with little wind or monsoon rains. So this program is there, and through this program we have assessed and saved more than 6,000 trees, various trees, Terminalia, Bellerica, mango, and you can just see our campaign. And donating is one thing, but there are wonderful stories about the giant trees put on the campaign as a part of our reporting mechanism, and you will enjoy those stories of trees. Then we have a campaign launched last year, which is called as Species Distancing Campaign, because after the pandemic we are talking about social distancing. But why this pandemic has reached us? Because we never looked at nature, we never distanced ourselves from the nature, and we wanted to get into the nature, destroy it, and we all the time we were expecting that someone else, might be AERF or urban nature lovers or government or someone else, will maintain some forest somewhere for my pleasure. So we never maintained and protected the nature around us. So it's time for us to distance ourselves from the nature and protect it. So that campaign is also running and on. And few days ago, many people wanted us to make best use of our network on such platforms, and we have also put a small campaign for oxygen concentrators, and people are also supporting that, because the situation of pandemic is becoming green in villages like remote corners of Ratnagiri and all. So we are trying to do that. Of course, that is not our main work, but we thought we must also support our communities, because our communities have been supporting us for last 25 years for conservation, which is not a day-to-day business for them, or which is not a day-to-day development kind of work. Somebody goes with to them and they are supporting us, so it's our turn to support them. So that's what we are doing. Then we have a lot of experiential learning, online courses. Then we also have a course on leadership for community-based conservation. Then there are opportunities for people to volunteer us and intern with us. We have these 3 websites called as www.aerfindia.org, then www.myforest.co.in, and www.natureconnectindia.com, because Nature Connect is a company which is doing the business, because AERF being a non-profit cannot do the business. So Nature Connect is our wing which is doing business and providing benefits to local people. Or you can write to us on info@aerfindia.org. And Anand knows, and there are people like Aparna and others. I always reply to email. So I would love to be connected with you guys. And thank you very much. I think I finished in 45 minutes. And thank you very much. I love to talk about my work. I know it was very, very rapid, but unless you come and spend some time in the field with us, you will not understand the complicated nature of our work, engaging with communities, providing benefits at the same time, all the time, monitoring that in the process, nobody will feel that, hey, I got this enterprise and I'll cut all the forest or I'll collect all the fruits. So, this is very challenging, but me and my team has been trying to do our best, and we love our work. That's why over the period of last, say, 35 years, I'm doing this work, and there was not a single day where I felt bored. At times I was frustrated, no doubt about that, but it was not boring even on a single day, because even today, my team from the field keep painstakingly taking pictures from the field, what's happening. And, I always try to feel that I'm in the forest and I'm going, and I go to the forest and spend time 15 to 20 days in the field even now. Unfortunately, during the pandemic time, this has reduced, but I always would love to be in the field, and you are all most welcome to join hands with us. And thanks for your patient hearing. And I'm ready to reply to any questions if you have. Thank you very much. Thank you, Anand. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Team Sprout.
So thank you, Archana. Please take a sip of water and catch your breath. There are a lot of questions. I think I can see almost about 20 questions now already.
Okay, Anand.
So that is
it you will take the question and tell me, or you want?
Yeah, I will tell you the question and then you can answer that. It's easier for you.
Repetitive,
Correct. You already covered some parts of it, so I'll moderate it also. So first question is from Abhishek Shukla. Are private forests owned by an individual or by a community? And there's a second part to it. What are they generally used as in this landscape?
That's a very good question. And sometimes, I never give every detail because then we cannot have the communication exchange like this. In Konkan, especially in Ratnagiri district, these forests are owned by families or individuals, but fortunately or unfortunately, the land segregation has not taken place in Ratnagiri. Now they have started doing it, but it's a huge process. So these are the lands owned by the communities, owned by the families. There are no community lands as you see in other parts of the country, but the sacred forests, these are lands owned by the revenue department on paper, but they are managed by the community. So it is slightly complicated, but most of the private lands are owned by families or individuals. Earlier in this area, say till 1990, definitely a specialized kind of agriculture used to be practiced in that area called as shifting agriculture. In Northeast India, it is called a joom. It is slash and burn. You select a patch of forest, you do some agriculture, you cultivate for a year or so, and then go to another plot and come back on the first plot after say 10 years. And because high rainfall area, some forest or the other used to grow there. But of course, this cycle of shifting agriculture, that is the time to come back on the first plot, was 10, sometimes 15 years. So really good forest used to come there. So from 1990 onwards, shifting cultivation has reduced almost to like it is just 0.05% being practiced in some of the remote areas, therefore, these fallow lands have developed into some kind of a forest or the other. Similarly, there are certain forest patches on the slopes which have not been cut or used for shifting agriculture over the period of 30 to 40 years. In the northern Western Ghats landscape, in 80s, there was a rampant process of charcoal making because these forests were full of Terminalia chebula, Hirida trees, and Hirida makes best charcoal. So people all the way from Belgaum and other areas, they used to come here with the groups of indigenous community, mainly Katkaris, who are good at charcoal making. They used to camp in the forests of Koina and all for 4 to 5 months, and they used to destroy all the forests. Fortunately, in 1986-87, government of Maharashtra has passed a resolution that no charcoal making is allowed in Maharashtra. So that was stopped. So, these lands were used either for shifting agriculture, and later on they fall prey to the charcoal making.
Okay, thanks. So the next question is from Archana, from Amruta from my team. Amruta's question is that, 1 second, yeah. Yep. A lot of questions. 1 second. Yeah. So what is the kind of protection, legal protection, do sacred groves and private forests get under the law?
There is no protection in private forest because it's, say, for example, it's my forest. I can just go and cut it. It's not government's forest. It's not forest department's designated reserved or protected or any forest. It's my forest. Government has nothing to do with private forest lands. And therefore, as I said, it's a blessing in disguise. You can just go and talk to people and work for protection. We had a worst experience when we were working in one of the protected areas from Eastern Maharashtra. In Nagjira, we had a small project and we wanted to build some drinking water structures for birds, like shallow pans, and Kiran Purandare was helping us, and he was also one of the partners of the project. And we wrote to Forest Department to have those pans, which are like just say a couple of meters in diameter, so you can. But Forest Department took 1.5 years for us to give the permission. So one of our friends was there in Forest Department. He said, "Go do it. Let's see if somebody takes objection." But for us, fortunately, in this area in Konkan, we don't have to take any permission of the Forest Department. So we just go and do whatever we want to do with people. But we need to convince the people. We need to get the signatures of all the claimants. Then we need to make certain things clear that even if you enter into an agreement, it is just a MOU. We are not taking that paper into any court. It is a non-judicial stamp paper based agreement. And the bold
Archana, sorry. The question is for sacred groves and private forests in terms.
I have that in. But sacred groves, as I said, at least in Ratnagiri and Sindhudurg district, they are owned by Revenue Department. These are Mahsul lands. But these are very small, and Mahsul or no revenue could be collected from these sacred groves. So they are not bothered about that. As far as Forest Department is concerned, they never consider small sacred groves as forests. They said we can't, invest money and manpower for protection of these scattered sacred grove in various villages. As you know, that Forest Department or the Ministry of Forest, Environment and Climate Change is the only ministry with lowest outlay in every budget in this country. So you can imagine biggest sanctuary, 126 square kilometer sanctuary of Bhima Shankar has only 4 guards. So you can imagine the plight of our forest department and the kind of resources they have. But fortunately, the management of sacred forests rests with local people and this community of Mankaris or the traditionally respected families from the village.
So if I can add this modifier and ask this question a little, that like water bodies, wetlands have been now given deemed protected status. Rivers and wetlands have been given that. Can a PIL or can an activist group file a case like this and say sacred grove should be given a deemed protected status under the Wildlife Protection Act? Can that be an appeal done like this?
I think that could be done, but it is a kind of a two-edged sword. You feel that once the deemed status is given, the protection will be ensured. It's not the case. And people in Konkan, because you have been traveling and moving around in that area, people hate forest department. They're very, very happy with what they have been doing. And secondly, a couple of years ago, and still that exercise is going on, there was a revision of forest policy of India is being done, and I think a couple of drafts are already drafted. And in that, we have provided our inputs on how to do the conservation of sacred groves and ensure a little more protection, or it's very difficult because if you want to renovate the temple in the sacred grove, technically speaking, legally speaking, you will have to take the permission of district collector because they are the owners and you are trying to do some modification on the collector's land. But people never do that. So if you put another, hurdle of getting permission of forest department and all, people will simply go and cut the forest within the sacred forest. So, we need to be very, very cautious while saying that government can do everything and they're the best protectors. No, there was no forest department, there were no protected areas, but in this country as well as elsewhere across the globe, forests were protected by local communities' use and local communities' ways and means of protecting them. So but again, I'm not saying communities are greatest. There has to be some via media, there has to be some balance where communities will be engaged and government will also be participating. And if you look at the Biodiversity Act, it provides some kind of space where we can get the heritage status to some of the sacred forests and ensure the protection. Then biodiversity management committees are there, so they can take this responsibility, and then government can provide some rewards for protecting biodiversity and good sacred forests in the village.
Om Sai Shinde has asked this question. Why are tiger populations in Western Ghats in Maharashtra region low in compared to Karnataka? He said Southern Western Ghats, but Om Sai, Karnataka is Central Western Ghats. It's not Southern Western Ghats. Yeah.
Tiger?
Yeah. Why tiger numbers in Western Maharashtra, the Western Ghats of Maharashtra is low compared to Karnataka, like Dandeli, etc.
I think I will not take this agreement.
Yeah.
There are tigers in Northern Western Ghats, and we also have them on our cameras in some of the remote forests, but we are totally against in counting the numbers and sending a group of very enthusiastic just researchers who are interested in their papers, not interested in saving any corridor or any habitat of the tiger. So there are tigers, and fortunately or unfortunately, they are not available for sighting to the
common tourist.
Common tourists, like you can do in Kana and Bandhavgarh and all that Central Indian highlands where you can. But tigers are there, and I think it is not important for us to see or count the tigers, but it is important for tiger to be there.
Thank you. I'm very happy with this answer. So Anita Gandhi has asked this question, is that, and I think it's a very cutting edge kind of question. She's saying that, the solution that you are suggesting of, people investing in private lands being protected while forest department and governments are going and en masse cutting out forests. Do you think this is the way out, that people will, protect their small patches of land and government goes and gives whole contracts to cut out entire forest patches? So
I think this is a very broad question, and it might need another couple of hours to debate around.
Yeah.
So see, we cannot say government's development. We are also part of that because we also need roads. We also need, you know, the mined material. We also need the minerals and stuff. We also need water. We also need electricity. So we are also linked to that. Don't think that it is only government doing that.
Right.
Number one. Secondly, wherever people are ready to maintain their forest patches, and we are aware, in the vast landscape of Northwestern Ghats, even if we have like 500 sacred groves protected, which are very small, is not enough at landscape level. So we have set one target and we are trying to work towards that. However, we absolutely do not wish that government will make a scheme of forest protection using our approach, because then it will fail, because we have seen many failed schemes like Jala Swarajya, and plantation programs, planting crores of trees, and next year you go and plant the tree in the same pit. And whenever we urban nature lovers or anybody who loves nature says this, that government is doing that, please don't say that. It is for us, because we are getting all the benefits. All of us are enjoying the road, all of us are enjoying the expressway between Mumbai and Pune. So this emotional appeal, that government is cutting the forest and people are maintaining the forest, I don't really take it, because I'm also responsible when I'm saying that government is doing that. Government is also doing it for me.
Right.
So we need to look at it from a very, very balanced perspective. But at the same time, if government is cutting trees rampantly over, say, like thousands of square kilometers, then we must protest, and we should see to it that how that could be stopped, number one. And secondly, whenever we oppose certain things, we need to have the alternative. And most of the times, all my activist friends, they don't have alternative. So say, for example, I can give you little, I will not take much time, but 2010 there was a huge proposal for iron ore mining in Sindhudurg district, in Dodamarg and Savantwadi blocks. And this is the 500 square kilometer wonderful forest. Of course, in some areas, people have cut the forest and went for plantations of, rubber and cashew and, areca nut, whatever. But still, it was a great forest, and many mining proposals were there. And AERF has worked with local communities. And instead of doing any activism, what we did, we created a biodiversity assessment report with the community. And that report has been used by certain activist groups in the court. And in 2010, there was a public hearing for this proposal in village Asniye. And that public hearing went on from 8:30 in the morning till 11:30 at night. There was not a single slogan, no slogan hearing, no shouting. People from the village, 80 different people, they gave their speeches, and all the speeches were only about biodiversity and importance of biodiversity in that area. And that was the only public hearing in Maharashtra, probably in India, where we took the report, summary report of public hearing on the spot. You remember, Anand, we had the public hearing experience in Tapi.
Exactly. Yeah.
How collector had to intervene and police were called. But here, it was completely different. So if you want to use biodiversity as a good tool with local people, then you can also oppose these things. And then just shouting, just sloganeering, just blocking the roads will not make any impact on government. They need papers, government needs papers. So you need to create papers which are genuine, which are true, and which are known to everybody who doesn't want X project or Y project. And that is what we have done. I think the report is available, and if some of you would like to have the copies in English and Marathi, I can give it to Anand, and you can then pick them up.
So as an ecologist, I'd like to add a few things, and Archana can take a little breath in the meanwhile. So I think one has to also realize that there is something called as a landscape approach of conservation, and then there is a micro approach. So national parks and sanctuaries, they might be composite places, but also there are mosaics, there are corridors which can be there between these two places, and those run through cities and villages and community areas. So community reserves, which are the new systems that are also coming in. Also, one has to understand that if the community, like what AERF is doing, if the community is not for conservation, is not benefited and involved in the conservation process, then how much ever government pressure comes in, it will not on ground. So it's both ways. If the community is convinced and the government is not convinced, or if the government is pushing it and the community is not convinced, I think both those wheels of the car has to run together for a democratic system to work. So I think, like I say, that while we need a good planet for the citizens to be, benefited, we need good citizens for the planet to survive. So I think, here we are, community involvement is the good citizenry that is there. If the community, like she said, is not involved in the conservation process, then conservation, how much ever government shouts and wants to push it, it's not going to happen. And the vote bank politics does not work that way. Anyway, next question is by a student, Urja, and I think it's been answered. Can an environmental or ecology field student be a part of AARF? And any option for internships, that's already been mentioned. So please, look up the websites, aarfindia.org, and then
myforest.in. Yeah.
myforest.co.in.
The internship opportunities are there on aarfindia.org.
Yeah, you can check up the aarfindia.org website, Urja. Om Sai has asked, ma'am said about mass cashew cultivation in Konkan, which leads to deforestation. Can we adopt agroforestry system there, and is it adopted there? So, Om Sai, you should also note cashew is not an Indian plant; it's an introduced species. So, Archana, further.
I think I also have different thoughts on this Indian and outside. It's like if a plant has come to India, say 200 years ago, then I call that as Indian. Otherwise, all our friends and relatives who are there in America, they are outsiders and they should be out, and not be cultivated in any way. So just take this trajectory and try to understand that now cashew is Indian plant, and there are also some native cashews which have developed, naturally over the period of time since this plant came to India. I think we are also working on agroforestry models, and we are, as I said in the beginning, I just talked about 2 umbrella programs which have been on, and but we are doing lots and lots of other smaller ideas, implementing ideas, because just couple of ideas will not be good enough for conservation in long term. So we are definitely doing agroforestry models basically based on bamboo and Pterocarpus marsupium and certain other things. Then we are also trying to convert the existing orchards of cashew and mango to total organic, and getting them certified under Fair for Life certification. So the mangoes and cashew, they get huge remuneration and better price, so that people will not go for cutting more forest and expanding their plantations. So, we are trying to do different ideas, and because everything is not doable at every site, or every village. Yeah, but agroforestry we are definitely doing. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to combine 2 questions, one by Rahul Palekar and one by, I think, Rahul Chauhan. Rahul, both the Rahuls have asked a very similar question. Rahul Palekar has asked that sensitive tourism, you mentioned sensitive tourism. How do you propose doing that? And does the model of, homestays and ecotours, how does that, how do you
I think
envisage that?
I think it's very easy to plan it on paper, but to implement the homestays and sensitive tourism on the ground, you need to have the local leaders who understand what it means. I mean, any person from the village. In one of the villages near Prachitgarh, at the footy, near Prachitgarh, there was a lady who was Muslim, but she was so enterprising, and she has started this ecotourism and taking people to Prachitgarh. And I'm very sorry, and I miss her too much, because she lost her life to COVID 20 days ago. But she was the one, but she was the local leader. She knew how to do tourism. She never allowed people to take any cigarette or any bottle of beer or anything. Then first, when they arrive in her house, she used to give them a little lecture like what we get in other sanctuaries and all, about do's and don'ts. And then we because she was also doing more than 200 acres of forest conservation with us, we provided her some support to improve her facility of staying right in the forest. But again, 2 of the local guards, they used to stay with people. So I think it's a good idea, but it is not so easy as it is said. It takes efforts of years, and our tourists, they also need to be educated about that, because I have seen people enjoying just beer and throwing the bottles anywhere in the nature, and they say, because I have paid some tourist tax or I have paid some money to the BMC of the village, it's not my responsibility to pick up my plastic and beer bottles, and that's true. I'm not just telling you some made up story. So we also need to actually educate the urban tourists and tell them what nature tourism is. Mostly nowadays people go there, take pictures, take selfies and post them on Facebook, but if you ask them what really they have enjoyed and what reached in their heart and what will remain with them throughout their life, and most of them, they will realize after coming back that there is a big void. So it's two-way.
Right. So there's another question by Abhishek Shukla. He's asking, what are the factors considered for ecological restoration to be? When do you say that ecological restoration has been achieved, and what's like the time span for the functionality of these forests to be considered as restored forest? I think we can keep the questions a little short. There are a large number of questions, answers. Huh?
Answer. See, basically, eco restoration is a huge, long, lengthy process. We have started eco restoration with a very, very scientific planning and implementation in a couple of degraded sacred forests. In most of the other forests which we are protecting, we cannot start, say, eco restoration on 200 acres unless we have enough support for that. But what we do is we do all the assessment, we mark all the big trees, we mark and map the areas where they are opened up and we can do some local species plantation and how to guard them. Then another important aspect of protection is having fire lines, because man-made fires are quite rampant during March, April and May in this area. So and then constantly talking to people that they should not go to the forest and try to extract certain things without planning. In some of our areas, we are also working on sustainable harvesting of catechu, that we never allow people to cut the younger trees. We select few older trees which will get more money. So an eco restoration we are doing, and there we have to do a lot of soil erosion control, we have to do plantations, we have to, most important thing, and which is really eating a lot of our resources and money, is removing the climbers, eupatorium and lantana, because unless you remove that, you cannot provide sunlight to the growing saplings. But we have been doing it for 4 years and we have all the pictures of before and after, and if you come with us, we can show you the results. But it's a long process. Even the experts, they say that it takes minimum 10 years in tropical areas like Ratnagiri district where rainfall is high to see some results. So we are doing that, and nowadays there is a lot of interest by the conservation organizations across the globe for restoration, rewilding. These are the new jargons you must have heard or read, and people are ready to put some money on that, at least for demonstration. So we are doing that, and we are getting there.
Okay, another very big question by Mr. Sheikh from Sri Rampur. He's asking that what is the status, like, from the given the Kasturi Rangan and Madhav Gadgil report, what do you think is the on-ground situation of the Western Ghats? Is it in line, or is it like really completely off the plan?
Absolutely not in the line, because most of the state governments, they conveyed to the Ministry of Environment and Forest that we give a damn to this eco-sensitive village mapping and stuff. We don't want our villages to be ecologically sensitive because people are deprived, and this is all politicking, But because no decision has been taken otherwise, people like us, we are trying to use those designations and lists in our favor, and how we make best use of that for protection. But in some areas, Biodiversity Act is proven a very good tool. Say, for example, in the Asniya landscape in Sindhudurg, where we were trying to stop the mining, and I'm very happy to tell you that happened in 2010, and till there is no mining. And we also had some conservation agreements right in the conservation lease area. So in that area, there are a couple of villages which have been declared as sanctuaries for hornbills, sanctuaries for turtles, and the second one got the status of heritage site. and people are protecting that through the support from government and Biodiversity Board of Maharashtra. So that is happening, but most of the states are against because they want to grab the land, they want to destroy the land. Nobody understands the importance of forest, and especially in the area like in Maharashtra, where protected areas are very few in the northern parts of Western Ghats.
Uh, Another big question by Rahul Palekar. What are your thoughts on carbon credits? So whether selling carbon credits and offsetting it for maintaining the projects. Do you personally, we can keep it short, you can answer yes or whatever.
I think yes. Now again, the price of carbon is going up in the international market, but to bring those projects in reality is huge process and a big game of patience. And there is one more caveat to that, because in India, if you want to do any voluntary carbon project where we fall in, because we are not working on forest lands, any voluntary carbon projects, the nodal agency is MOEFCC. So you can imagine, to get all the permissions and stuff. I have been trying to do a project with International Timber Trade Organization, ITTO, for last 5 years, and our project is approved and they have liked it. But there is a big red tape in between, because our government has to send that project formally to ITTO, and then only they can support us. So you can imagine. But yes, carbon is there on the platter. And I think within say 3 to 4 years, and after the pandemic and all, I think we can definitely be in a position to bring that into reality.
Deepak Gurjar is asking, is
Runs a tail, and I never talked about it, but we are
Yeah.
doing forest protection and enterprise work in Alibag. So many of our corporate partners, they also would love to come somewhere near Mumbai, and people from Credit Suisse and Daikin, and many of them, they come to Alibag. The idea is to enjoy Alibag and to see our work.
Sunita Maral, she said she joined in a little late, asking what types of trees that are conserved, and are they a promotion of plantation and conservation of specific species related to national and international demand?
I think plantation is our last choice, because we are working for protecting whatever is there, because we believe in natural forests, and we don't believe in creating a forest by plantations of whatever kinds of trees. And if you have to really create a forest, you need to have 40 years of work, like Payang Jadhav from Majoli Islands, who has created a forest, and elephants are coming to his forest. So we don't believe in creating a forest by planting any kinds of trees, but whenever it comes to plantation, which we call just augmenting, the existing natural resource areas, and we go for native species which have got some value or the other, and plantation is absolutely the last choice. Regeneration, natural regeneration.
Yeah.
And restoration, and
maybe supportive plantation in restoration of.
Yeah.
I did not understand this question. Mervyn D'Souza is asking, is any study done on northern Western Ghats in Goa?
See, in Goa, whatever Western Ghats are there, we call them northern Western Ghats, and
Yeah.
Goa is full of huge amount of research papers. New species are finding there. Then Rajendra Kerkar has been writing about sacred groves, and Mohan Pai's analysis is there, and there are lots of Girish Punjabi and his team through ATRI has done some work on studying tigers and presence and absence of tiger with Abhijit Kulkarni. So I think lots of papers are available. They may not have called northern Western Ghats in those days, but all the new papers
classification,
have phrase northern Western Ghats.
Shrujan, who's a student and he's in Ratnagiri right now, he's asking that there's a lot of burning of weeds which are growing in the farms. So does this have any negative effect on the forests?
I think whatever they burn in Ratnagiri is a very small rap kind of thing, which they burn for improving the fertilizers, fertility of the soil, and not of the whole field, but just a patch where they're doing rice nursery or rice plants. So I don't think it is really.
No, but that escapes out, and then the entire mountain slopes tend to burn from there. So.
The first and foremost important thing is the notorious weed from northern western Ghats slopes is Eupatorium, and Eupatorium has very light seeds that are dispersed through wind. So it has nothing to do whether you burn it or you don't burn it. It goes. And another very important thing is in northern western Ghats, even a small patch is opened up by cutting the trees. The first successor is Eupatorium. So this burning is not necessarily the main agent of dispersal of Eupatorium or Calicopteris floribunda or lantana or any other weeds.
Okay, Ram Prasad is asking, is it sustainable to grow only native plants in a sacred groves? And how do you conserve native fruits and vegetables when we are consuming things like American corn?
I think this is a big question, but number one thing, I'm not cultivating anything in the sacred groves. We are trying to maintain and protect the sacred grove. Whatever natural regeneration happens, we allow that, number one. Secondly, we are just collecting some medicinal fruits from sacred groves, and we are not doing any plantations in sacred groves, because doing plantations in sacred groves is another ball game. You have to take the permission from collector, BMC, and whole lot of things. Of course, we've done that in the past, but we planted native species. I think it's very personal, whether you would like to eat American corn or not. If you don't like, don't eat it. But India is such a big country, you cannot stop people eating American corn, because everyone is not empowered about environment and bad effects of American corn, or
But would you think that these new concepts like farmers markets which are coming, which can supplement, if or even this Ran Bhaja Utsav and all, where it can have a double-edged impact on.
I mean, Ran Bhaja Utsav is good. I appreciate them, but I don't think it's going to really contribute to conservation, because, say, for example, wherever you get, say, Bharangi, clerodendron, unless that forest and unless that associated plants remain on the slope, people are not converting those areas into plantations or something else, you're not going to get those Ran Bhajas. That is one. Secondly, if people started liking one Ran Bhaji, then everybody would go and flock and collect everything whatever is remaining in the nature.
And make it extinct.
Yeah, absolutely. And then local extinction will be rampant. And after a few years, we will not. So it's good. It's a good academic exercise. It is good to get the attraction of people from abroad and do it. And I'm very sorry to say, people will what I'm going to say, but I have been traveling in the forest for more than 35 years, and there are very few exceptions, but most of the Ran Bhajas, they are not very tasty. I'm telling you.
Okay.
I'm not saying just by reading something, I have written it. Because my PhD base is basically use of plants by tribal people from northern Western Ghats. And if my informant told me that this is used and eaten, then I made it a point to eat it the way they used to eat it. And I'm telling you, except for 1 or 2%, rest of them are not tasty at all.
Okay. Now I'd request everyone, please don't put in any more questions, because we have about 10 more questions, and that's about it. It's 7:44.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll combine them. I'll keep them really short. You can also give one sentence answers. Yeah. So Siddharth has asked 3 questions. I'll combine them. So what do you term as a healthy forest? What are the factors you look for? And considering the local socio-economic conditions of people, how do local communities get involved in restoration projects?
Healthy forest is the one where you can see some florid structure, you can see some old growth trees, and per hectare, the diversity or the density of various plants is very high. Then you can see some signs, or you can signs of some mammals and animals. You can see birds, you can see butterflies, insects, amphibians and stuff. And so that I will call healthy forest. Secondly, to engage with people, the first and foremost important thing is you need to demonstrate that the standing forest gets them direct benefits, not intrinsic, like your water will be restored and you will get clean air and it looks good and all. They're not bothered about it. They need hard cash like everyone else in the urban area gets it. So how do we get it? That is extremely important. But at the same time, you can't go with a proposal of getting money from the forest on day one. So you need to talk, you need to communicate, you need to have continuous interactions with them and help them understand together with you that forests are important for them as well as for us, for everyone.
Okay. Suchandra has asked, is People's Biodiversity Register concept applicable to sacred groves? And if yes, what is the status of documentation of biodiversity in these areas? What about documentation of traditional practices?
Uh, um, Last year, in a haste, because of the pressure from court, Government of Maharashtra and Biodiversity Board started getting the biodiversity registers at village level done. And AERF was engaged with board for doing 72 registers, and they wanted us to give you the complete register in 1 month, and we said no, we cannot give you the register. So whatever we gave was just rapid documentation of 72. And government promised yesterday in one of the webinars, somebody said that government, after doing PBR, will give money to villagers, but none of the villagers have got yet money. No villages have got money. Then there are many smaller organizations came up who never had to do anything with conservation, and they thought because of the facilitating agency they will also get some money. So they went into that and they have done absolutely copy paste. And my friends from Sangli, they sat together with many such PBRs and found copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. So that is the plight of government's work around biodiversity. But in 2019, AERF worked with GIZ and Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board, and we worked with 4 villages for more than a year's time. And we have created complete detailed biodiversity registers. And because the BMCs and people participated in that, Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board also gave them money. But these are elaborate documents, more than 400 pages each. And we have done a huge process of building capacity of the local people, talking to them, training them, going with them in the forest, having transit walks. So it's a big project. It's a big process, and it takes time and resources. You just can't go to the village and say, hey, tell me your traditions, and you write them down. First of all, people don't have time. They don't believe in government's process. Secondly, whatever information I'm sure Suchandra knows this better because she herself has documented quite a lot. For authenticity of any ethnobotanical information, you need to go and repetitively check it and figure out from people. In Ratnagiri district, quite a lot of work has been done on documenting ethnobiological knowledge of people. We have done through this, exercise of BMCs. We have contributed to that. And another very important thing for AERF is whenever we do any conservation agreement in any village, we do a lot of biodiversity assessments and documentation of traditional knowledge, because analysis of that ultimately gives us the window to develop something bringing benefits to people. But that will not bring benefits that X plant is used for something and then you go and collect and it will get money to you.
Prajwal Kadam is asking a question, and Prajwal, the question is a little faulty, but I'll yet ask it. How efficiently can we increase protected area network by the help of private forests? Does it really happen?
I think I will not call that as a very wrong question, because in my talk initially I talked about creating some kind of community reserves, and if we have the community reserve, it is the category 4 protected area.
Yeah, okay, right, yeah.
And that is possible, but again, that process is too long, because we have been working for one area of say 2,000 hectares, and to get the signatures of every owner, the BMC, the village management, local traditional setup of mankaris and the logging contractors, it's huge process. And they feel, because I said they are not very happy with forest, they feel, oh, if we get this status, then forest department will not let us do anything in our forest. So that is a big process. But yes, there is a scope to have this community reserves or conservation reserves. But of course, conservation reserves are done on reserve forest lands of forest department.
Correct.
But community reserve is a good window, but it takes a lot of time.
Lot of time.
Like
Yeah.
PCCF of Maharashtra, he said, "You bring me the proposal and I'll sign it." But we cannot take the proposal with all the signatures yet to him for last 1.5 years.
No, and some of the experiences, why I said it's a little faulty is because in some of the processes, there are social activists who are confusing the villagers and saying, "Dekho, wo
Yeah.
national park sanctuary ban jayega," and then you lose your land ownership. So people are getting scared about it also, that they
Fortunately,
will lose.
that's not the case in our area, because
Yeah.
in Konkan, people never entertain the social
Yeah,
activism.
yeah, exactly. Okay, Nikhil Golwalkar is asking a very interesting question. Which particular area has recorded the highest number of tree cutting in the recent years in northern Western Ghats? Deforestation.
I think you can look at parts of Chiprun block, and we have done a study of deforestation based on GIS, covering almost 10 to 12 years. And we realized that even in Sangameshwar block, the forest cover has reduced by 30-35%, which was in 2010. And Chiprun is rampant. I don't know why, but a lot of plotting of the land and people from abroad buying the lands and some kind of, bungalow development schemes. The first thing when they buy the land, they cut the trees. So in
Yeah.
Chippewa, it is higher. It is highest, but I don't have figures right now with me.
So I have one question, Archana, that while community conservation processes are also important, do you think our forests are maintaining their biodiversity? We are, of course, your work is largely with communities and with conservation. But while we are, trying to protect biosphere is, sacred groves and community areas as forests, what is happening to our protected areas? What is the situation there? Are they getting opened out, or are they losing their biodiversity, or are they remaining like that? What's your
This
experience?
a question that could bring a lot of debate, but in case of protected areas, the diversity is fixed basically, and many of them are the climax kind of forest because they were not worked or used by communities for longer periods of time. But at the same time, we are not controlling the birds, or we are not controlling the wind, which is taking the other propagules and changing the areas within these sanctuaries. There are lots and lots of studies available done by WII, which basically is talking about the biodiversity of herbaceous flora that is being used by herbivores, and the number of herbivores, how they have increased, stabilized, and decreasing in some areas, and how that is affecting the population of prey animals. So all those studies are available. But I think, in my opinion, and based on my experience of 3 decades, I feel that if the forest is used by people, there are better chances that it will be protected, rather than having strictly protected areas. But in the country like India, we also need to have some strict protected areas where people are not allowed or people are taken out, if we want to seriously maintain at least say 30-35% of our biodiversity of this country. We need protected areas. I'm not saying we don't need, because in India, people need to have some legal barrier. Otherwise they would have destroyed, and especially in these times, where money is the basic value of life, and that's the impact of globalization.
So my second question that I had, and which will be the last question, I'm going to take the last word myself. So my second question is that which was the most amazing forest area that you sort of experienced, and I think we should end on a positive note. Of course, we have talked about a lot of challenges. So which was the area that sort of took your heart away? Like really.
I think there are few areas which I still remember. I no more work in Northeast now, but in Nagaland, some of the areas like Zafu, Peak, and other areas, it has got a wonderful forest. In our area, there are some beautiful corners near the crestline in Ratnagiri district. Some of the forest areas which are linked with Koina Wildlife Sanctuary, they are wonderful forests. Then forests of Prachitgarh and Mahipatgarh area.
Yeah.
And recently I had been to Dandeli and I'm thoroughly impressed. I had been to Dandeli a few years ago, but I just went in December and I'm thoroughly impressed. And that's amazing forest. And if they can speak, they can tell us about the history of forests in Western Ghats. So thank you very much.
Great. So thank you, Archana, and thank you to all the audiences. I think that's what happens in Sprouts lectures. That usually the question answer sessions goes for an hour, but I think that also is a part of the mental churning. One has to really. It allows you to the time to think and discuss. Otherwise, usually what happens is that there's a 1 hour lecture and only 15 minutes for Q&A. So we believe in putting equal amount of time on that. So Amruta Padukavkar from my field team, I'd like to invite her to propose the vote of thanks. So Amrita, over to you.
I would like to thank Dr. Archana Godbole for such a wonderful talk. It actually gave us a perspective of what is happening in these areas and how sacred groves and private forests can help in conservation. I would also like to thank ARF and the team for the immense, invaluable biodiversity protection that they have been doing for the last 26 years. A special thanks to FES and Mandvi, Kurukshetra, and Anurag Shankar for co-hosting today's session, and Dviti Das, Rahul Palekar, Siddharth Varadkar of the Sprouts Environment Trust team for supporting the lecture series. And of course, the audience who have been so patient and present for the lecture.
Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next month. The talk on next month will be on marine diversity. Since next month is the World Ocean Day on 9th of June, the date and the details will be sent to you like we do all the time. So please keep continuing joining on the lectures, and thank you, Archana, once again. That was a fantastic and powerful talk.
Bye. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.